Hello and welcome to our Native American history class. My name is Dr. Jarvis. I'm going to be your professor for the next few weeks as we walk through Native American history and culture. It's kind of nice having a classroom here, don't you think, for Native American studies right out in the Native American church is what the Native Americans would call this place. First thing you need to know about me is your professor. I'm really committed to building a close-knit, a nice, warm community of learners as we interact on computers and internet. Maybe we'll be like a little electronic tribe, a cyberspace tribe in our own way. I hope it grows that way, but I want to start with a warm welcome. First thing you need to know about me is I'm not Native American. Second thing you need to know about me is I was born among the Native Americans and raised until I went to college or university at age 18, 19. I lived among Sacagawea's people for the first 14 years of my life. Then my family moved to the other side of the mountains where we lived among the Nez Perce people until I graduated from high school. So I find that the older I get, I tend to gravitate back toward many of the things I experienced and saw and felt as I was growing up all those years among the Indians. Oh, by the way, they call themselves Indians. We call them Native Americans. They say, thank you for the nice new name. It's better than the old name you gave us, maybe. But if you really want to show some respect, just maybe give us back the land. My Indian friends would laugh if I called them Native Americans, so I don't. They do tell me that I'm red on the inside and white on the outside, and so we get along. There's some hope there for cross-cultural sort of friendships. So let me start out here by saying that this history course, I think, will be different from probably any kind of history course you've had before. And the good news for you is that I won't ask you to memorize facts. You won't need to know battles and generals' names and who was the president when this happened and where did this happen and who won, and memorize all of this. It'll be on the test. In fact, there will be no memorization in this course. Native American history is storytelling. It's all storytelling. Good stories. Stories of truth and beauty and pain and sorrow and suffering and tragedy. So it's stories. And if I would characterize mainstream history, I'd call it history of the brain. Intellectual history. History of the brain, where you memorize a lot of stuff. This course, Native American friends would strongly agree, this is a course in the history of the heart. Let me give you an example of what I mean. In any history course, you always had this great battle you had to know about, whether in the Civil War, World War II, Revolutionary War, or Lexington conquered. You had to know. Battle. Who were the people fighting? What were they fighting about? What were the generals' names? Who was the president of the political party at the time? And who won? And exactly when did it start? When did it end? History of the brain. Native Americans also would look at a battle, but they would look at it as a story. How did it start? Who were the characters? Why did they fight? Who was brave? Who wasn't brave? But then they would do a twist that mainstream history still, I don't think, is done in any meaningful way. And that is, they would really want to know, how did the women who lost, whose husbands lost, whose warriors lost, the tribe that lost, how did the women get up the next morning and care for the children and the old people? How did they find the resilience, the courage to carry on in defeat? Because the Indians want to know that too, because that is history of the heart, history that matters, history that, number one, isn't boring, and two, history that sustains us and teaches us important lessons. So this course will be a course in history of the heart. Let me say that there's a deeper reason that I hope we'll tease out as this course flows along, deeper reason for why Native Americans choose to tell history as a history of the heart that's inclusive of women, of children, of old people. Everybody's in the story. Because they're a tribal culture, they want everybody's voice heard, even the women, even 1,000 years ago. So there's a reason that they tell the stories this way, and the reason boils down to this, among other things, but mainly they are matriarchal cultures. Women were also the storytellers. Women were the ones who got to decide what's important and what isn't important in remembering our past. In a matriarchal culture, then, you're going to see lots of differences. Women had voices. Women had power, social power. Men could not mess around with women in any way. Rape was virtually non-existent before white man came and introduced it to this land. And it's because there were so many social taboos in a culture where women had power. You could not do such a violent, terrible act to a woman without getting the death penalty by being banished from your tribe and sent in the woods, if not killed outright by the woman's brother's uncle's father. So women had power, and they still do. For example, I have a dear old friend who you will meet in this course, hopefully, 96 years old, so we're hoping he'll still be here 6 weeks from now. Johnny Paleface, he's Navajo Indian. In his culture, to this day, women inherit everything. When somebody dies, an old person dies, old people die, the daughters inherit from their mothers the house, the belongings, the land, the sheep, the goats, the cows. It all belongs to women. And why? Well, most logical reason that mainstream culture hasn't got yet is that the women are going to nurture and raise the children. They need resources to do that. They cannot do that on food stamps alone. They need power and resources to keep the tribe going, to keep the people going. So women inherit everything. Just one example of what a matriarchal culture does. So it's largely because we're studying a matriarchal culture, and I'm going to do it in the ways, as much as I can over the internet, in the ways that I was taught by Indians and around Indians and learned from Indians in my childhood. I'm going to do it in Native American course in a Native American way, which means for you that this is not going to be a boring course. The one thing I hope that you're going to appreciate most by the end of this course is how relevant Native American history is to our violent times, our difficult social times right now here in America. You know, there's mass shootings and massacres in parking lots in Arizona, in theaters in Colorado, in first grade classrooms in Connecticut. There's this incredible violence and a country armed to the teeth with guns. But this, of course, didn't just start last week or with Columbine High School in, what, 1990s, late 1990s. You need to know right from the beginning, because we're going to be studying it, there were close to 4 dozen Indian wars by 1890. This country had been through 4 dozen wars, not 1, 2, 3 like Revolutionary Wars, you know, War of 1812, Civil War. They had been through 4 dozen Indian wars that broke and destroyed the Indian nations. Nearly 500 nations. About 42 or 43 of them still speak their languages. That was the devastation. Mass murder began with Pocahontas's people in the early 1620s and did not end until 1890. 270 years of what we see, you know, almost weekly or monthly on our news today happening to the mainstream. That all happened already. Well, it didn't happen to the mainstream. It happened to, well, the majority at start that became a minority because of those wars. You can imagine who was the majority population, who was the mainstream of America in 1607 when John Smith stepped on this land. So that's where you're going to see a part of this whole story that relates to modern times. So I have one more bit of good news for you now that I've talked about the tragedy of American history, is that I will not emphasize the tragedy in this course. My Native American friends back in Idaho, and even many of them around here right in Massachusetts, would not be happy with me. They'll tell me, Jarvis, be sure to tell them that we're still here, that we got through the storm. Tell them of our triumph. This course will balance the tragedy of the past with the triumph that is happening now with Native Americans. Native Americans, some 4 million strong and growing here in America. They're still here. They're incredibly proud to be American, and they want that pride to be known. And it will be known in this class. So this class will be a balance of pain and joy, sadness and happiness. Like any native philosophy of life is always a balance of everything. So let me close this welcome with a summary that this course is going to be about the tragedy and the triumph of the original peoples who once owned all of this land where I'm sitting at this moment, all of the land where you are sitting at this moment, unless you're doing this course from overseas by internet. The people who gave everything so America could be built. They went from riches to rags, in a sense, while the rest of mainstream America was doing the American dream to do just the opposite, go from rags to riches. So we will tell this amazing story of tragedy, triumph, joy, sadness, life and death, love and hate. It's all going to be here. Now, let me leave you with a question. The question that's going to tease out in this course, I believe, as it always does, is the more you hear about this amazing story of an amazing, resilient people, American people, an amazing American story, you're going to begin to wonder, how is it that you don't know most of what I'm about to teach you? And these are not minor details. How is it you don't know what happened to the people who once owned this beautiful land? 10 million of them. This is my camera woman on this Native American shoot, known as, please introduce yourself, Miss.
I'm Hannah Jarvis, daughter of the fantastic Dr. Jarvis, who you'll probably be getting to know pretty well. So, have fun in his class, I'm sure you will.
The heart is the start of every odyssey. Mother, father, crying baby. Oh, the heart is the start, tapping the earth's backbone. Cold flow, snow blows up the Andes, Alps, there's rock, Himalayas and Rockies. Oh, Kilimanjaro is tapping the earth's backbone. Well, you can spend your time in an uphill climb, paying interest on the loans you find. You can simplify and rehumanify, celebrate relation with creation. Hey, hey now, dancing softly as raindrops falling between the evergreens. Oh, oh, dancing's a start, tapping